our first unit, we learned how to use the details in a passage to identify and make connections between different relationships in a text. And in that unit, we were introduced to the concept of text structures. Now, while we didn't refer to them as text structures, you may be familiar with the compare and contrast relationship, the problem-solution relationship, and some of the other relationships that we discussed. So let's take a moment and recap just a little bit and reacquaint ourselves with the idea of text structures. Now, a text structure is defined as a way to organize ideas in writing. An author is going to use these text structures to help us make connections between different ideas in a text. So it's important that you learn to identify these structures to help you understand those relationships between ideas, especially in informational text. So the most common types of text structures that you will encounter in an informational style text are, first, cause and effect. The cause and effect relationship, of course, presents causes and effects of a particular event, trend, or situation. And we know that the cause and effect relationship is being used by identifying certain signal words. These words include because, since, as a result, due to, or consequently. The next text structure that you will encounter is compare-contrast. And what this does is it presents similarities and differences, or comparisons and contrasts, between two or more things or ideas. Some signal words to be familiar with to identify the compare-contrast relationship include like, similarly, or in the same way when a comparison is being made. On the other hand, in contrast or unlike are signal words used when a contrast or the differences are being outlined. The problem-solution structure presents a problem and suggests one or more possible solutions. Some signal words to be familiar with for problem solution include issue, question, puzzle, proposed, and answer. And then finally, the sequential structure. What this does is it describes a series of events that happens in a certain order. So when we talk about sequential order, you do this first, and then take this action second, and then you do this third. Or if we're looking at a timeline of events, they are often listed in a specific order. Some signal words to know when specific dates and times are used. That will clue us in that we're talking about the sequential structure. Some specific signal words that we can use to identify the structure include first, next, during, finally, and while. So it's important that you know what the different types of structures are and that you be able to identify the signal words to let you know specifically which structure is being used. So let's work through a handful of examples and see if we can determine which text structure is being used by the author. Let's look at this first example and see if we can determine whether the author is using sequential or cause and effect. Among American robins, the female does most of the nest building. She starts by selecting a good site. Usually, this is a place protected from rain, wind, and sun, often on tree branches hidden by leaves. Then, using grasses and small twigs, she forms a cup-shaped nest. After forming this cup, the robin adds mud to reinforce it and cement it to its location on the tree branch or other base. Finally, she lines the nest with soft grasses and hairs. All this usually takes about 5 or 6 days, and it results in a fine home about 6 to 8 inches across and 3 to 6 inches high. So what structure is being used? Well, the way that we can determine this is by seeing if there are any specific signal words that are being used. So when we look, we get to the second sentence. It says she starts by selecting a good site. Okay, so we want to focus in on the word starts. Usually this is a place protected from rain, wind, and sun, etc. Then, using grasses and small twigs, she forms a cup-shaped nest. After forming this cup, the robin adds mud to reinforce it. Finally, she lines the nest with soft grasses and hairs. So why are these words important? Well, these signal words give us clues as to which structure is being used. Now, starts, then, after, finally. What do these words clue us in regards to the structure being used? Well, it sounds to me like we are being told about a process. You do this first, and then this next. Does that describe sequential or cause and effect? In this particular example, the author is using the sequential structure to explain how a female robin builds a nest. Therefore, we can conclude that sequential is the correct structure. Let's take a look at our next example. During World War I, British and American warships were at grave risk of German U-boat or submarine attacks. Warships were easily visible against the surrounding ocean, so British artist Norman Wilkinson proposed a scheme to address this concern. Rather than trying to hide the ships, he suggested painting them with bright shapes to confuse the enemy. More than 1,000 ships were painted with bold patterns, including complex patterns on the bow and stern, to confuse onlookers about which end was which. This technique, called dazzle camouflage, may not have actually confused the enemy, but it was effective in making the crews of the dazzle boats feel safer. Now, is the author using sequential or problem solution? Well, in this case, we do have some signal words that kind of stick out to let us know that, or let us know which structure is being used. Let's see if we can identify some of those. All right, so we're told that British artist Norman Wilkinson proposed to address this concern. So rather than doing something, he suggested painting them with bright shapes. One word, really one word and one phrase in this passage sticks out to clue us in whether this is a sequential or problem solution structure. Take a look at the word proposed and the phrase address this concern. Let's think for a moment. What does the word concern refer to? Well, if there is a concern, it's because there is some kind of an issue or problem. What was the problem? We see that in the first sentence. We are told that during World War I, British and American warships were at grave risk of German U-boat or submarine attacks. So the concern, of course, is the risk of German U-boat or submarine attacks. So that's our problem. U-boat attacks. So how is the concern addressed? Well, British artist Norman Wilkinson proposed a scheme to address this concern. So the word proposed is our signal word to let us know that he had come up with a solution. In this case, the structure being used is a problem-solution relationship. The problem: American and British warships were at great risk of being attacked by German U-boats. So the solution was to paint bold patterns on the ships to try to confuse the enemy. So we can conclude this is the problem-solution relationship. Let's see if we can determine whether the author is using compare-contrast or cause-effect in this example. Snowflakes are formed by water droplets freezing onto bits of dust in the atmosphere, but they come in many different shapes. The most well-known is the six-pointed starlight snowflake, paper versions of which can be found in the windows of many classrooms. But some snowflakes are simple six-sided discs, and others are tiny six-sided columns. Two main factors determine the shape of an individual snowflake crystal: the temperature and level of moisture in the air. Colder temperatures below -22 degrees Celsius or -7.6 degrees Fahrenheit produce simple discs and columns. The familiar star-shaped crystals form in warmer temperatures, and moister air gives rise to more complex shapes with more branches and details. So let's see if we can identify some signal words in this passage to help us determine whether this is a cause and effect relationship or a compare-contrast relationship. So to begin, let's look at the passage line by line. Snowflakes are formed by water droplets freezing onto bits of dust in the atmosphere, but they come in many different shapes. So the most well-known is six-pointed. Some snowflakes are simple six-sided disc, and others are tiny six-sided columns. So two main factors determine the shape of an individual snowflake crystal. All right, so we are told that there are two factors that determine shape. Factor one is the temperature. Factor two is the level of moisture in the air. So factor one and factor two. So colder temperatures below -22 degrees Celsius produce simple discs and columns. So we're told that the colder temperatures produce simple discs and columns. And then the star-shaped crystals form in warmer temperatures. So moisture air gives rise to more complex shapes with more branches and details. So what do you think? Is this a cause and effect or a compare and contrast? Well, when we consider how this information is being laid out, the author is discussing snowflakes in colder temperatures versus warmer temperatures. So when we have this warm versus cool discussion going on, does that sound like a cause and effect or a compare and contrast? Well, the information shows us the similarities with snowflakes as well as the differences depending on the temperature of the air. Based on this information, we can then conclude that what the author is doing is using compare and contrast to talk about how snowflakes are formed. We can also make connections in informational passages to determine what a text is about. Let's practice with this example, or this passage titled Golden Opportunity. A world record was broken in July 2002 when a coin was auctioned in New York City for $7.6 million. This particular 1933 double eagle became the most expensive piece of currency ever sold. Double eagles were manufactured by the United States Mint from 1849 through 1933. They are gold coins with a face value of $20, just as a nickel is worth 5 cents. A total of 445,500 double eagles were produced in 1933 alone. So how could just one of these $20 coins be worth so much money? When Franklin Roosevelt became President of the United States on March 4, 1933, the country was already in the middle of the Great Depression. This severe financial slump began in the United States, but its effects were felt worldwide. Millions of people in the U.S. were unemployed, and businesses and farms were going bankrupt at alarming rates. Additionally, the country's banking system was in crisis. President Roosevelt determined that more paper money needed to be printed to aid the economy, but he could not simply order money to be produced. Back then, banks had to keep a supply of gold that could be exchanged to people for dollars. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 required that the U.S. Central Bank keep in reserve about 40 cents worth of gold for every dollar it issued. Because of the Depression, the central bank no longer had enough gold in reserve to produce more paper money. However, Roosevelt developed a strategy. He signed Executive Order 6102. This order prohibited the hoarding of gold by American citizens, ordering them to surrender nearly all of their gold to the government in return for a cash payment of $20.67 per ounce. Citizens were told that the practice of stockpiling gold resulted in less spending and made the Great Depression worse, but the president knew the truth. If nobody could own gold, no one would be exchanging their paper money for gold at banks. As a result, the central bank no longer needed to keep a large supply of gold on hand for these exchanges. Paper money could be printed no matter how much or how little gold the central bank had in its reserves. Of course, Executive Order 6102 created controversy. Several people argued in court that it was against the U.S. Constitution for the government to take people's personal property. The order also drew criticism for how it was enforced. Citizens were required to turn in their gold to the government by May 1, 1933. After the deadline passed, the United States raised gold's value from $20.67 to $35 per ounce. The increase angered many who had followed the law and sold their gold cheaply. However, some supported the order due to the great desperation caused by the Great Depression. They believed this step was necessary to keep the economy afloat during hard times. Roosevelt's executive order also had a more direct effect on U.S. currency. It halted the production of gold coins. However, that year's batch of gold currency had already been manufactured, although it had not yet been put into use. Every 1933 double eagle coin was melted down, all except 22 of them as far as we know. 2 were intentionally saved by the government. These are now kept at the National Museum of American History. The other 20 were stolen before they could be destroyed. Because the stolen coins are still technically government property, none of the 1933 double eagles may be sold legally with a single exception. The United States reached a secret settlement with the holders of one of the stolen 1933 double eagles that allowed the coin to be placed on the auction block in New York. A coin's worth is largely based on how rare it is, so the 1933 double eagle is of an incredibly high value. But who knows, maybe more salvaged double eagles will be discovered someday. So, based on what we have just read, I know that was a rather long passage, but what was this text about? It is about the reasons for and the effects of Executive Order 6102. It is about the results of a coin sale linked to Executive Order 6102. Or it is about the reasons Executive Order 6102 made people angry. So the primary focus of this passage is dealing with Executive Order 6102. So why was the order issued? Well, we're in the middle of the Great Depression. The president wanted to print more money, and due to the laws on the books at the time, he legally could not do that. There had to be a certain amount of gold held in reserve in order to print money. So in an effort to try to get more gold from the American people, Executive Order 6102 was issued. Now, as we go through the passage, what we end up seeing is what happens as a result of Executive Order 6102 being issued. So, if you look at the second statement, it is about the results of a coin sale linked to Executive Order 6102. While that is mentioned in the passage, is that really what the entire passage is about? No, because it's more focused on the executive order, not on the actual coin sale. The coin sale is just one of the results. Now, people, of course, did get angry, if you look at the third option with Executive Order 6102, but again, this was just a result. Overall, the passage is going into detail about why the president issued this executive order and what happened as a result. Therefore, we can conclude that connecting the different ideas and details within the passage leads us to know that this text is about the reasons for and the effects of Executive Order 6102. In our final example, let's practice identifying details in a passage and make connections to help us trace the argument or claim that an author is making. So the argument or claim typically is the main idea or main point of the passage. And connecting these details will help us to pinpoint specifically what the author is trying to show us in the text. Let's take a look at this example titled Setting Up Camp. Vacation means something different to everyone. Some people love to bask in the sun on the beach and listen to the lapping waves of the ocean. Others pack up the car and take a trip across the country, stopping to see natural sights and roadside attractions along the way. And some people make camping a main part of their vacation. A camping vacation gives you the chance to enjoy nature and live a little differently from the way you normally do. In many ways, camping is the best type of vacation. The clearest benefit to camping is the time you spend outside connecting with nature and with other people. Camping offers a chance to separate completely from a more modern, busy, technology-driven life. In fact, according to the North American Camping Report, a high percentage of campers strongly agree that camping is a time to get away from stress and enjoy not having something to do. 68% of campers feel that camping helps them clear their minds. Of course, while there are relaxing aspects to camping, there's no getting around the fact that the packing and setup is a lot of work. Plus, some people just aren't fans of sleeping outside on the ground. However, there are plenty of ways to have a more comfortable camping experience. Some people stay in cabins that come with far more amenities than the typical tent. People who camp a lot sometimes travel in recreational vehicles or RVs or travel trailers, which have indoor sleeping space for everyone. And for a high-end experience, you could even try glamping or glamorous camping. Many locations offer luxury tents with staff meals and planned activities. Though there is some debate about whether glamping is true camping, the point is that there are a range of camping options. You can make the experience entirely your own. You can find islands, beaches, deep forests, and deserts to camp in, depending on what you'd like to do and where you'd like to explore. While you're camping, you can take advantage of your surroundings and go fishing, hiking, swimming, and canoeing. You can also spend time with your family and friends playing board games or sitting around the campfire. No matter how you choose to spend your time, you will leave with the satisfaction of knowing that you've created your own unique vacation. The good news is that once you've caught the camping bug, you'll have a hard time running out of beautiful places to camp in the United States, especially at national and state parks. Picture putting up a tent near a scenic view of active Hawaiian volcanoes or along the sprawling Rio Grande in Texas. Campsites are available near the stunning Stone Arches in Arches National Park in Utah and alongside wild ponies on Assateague Island in Maryland. For something completely different, you can even paddle or hike to remote campsites that don't allow cars. If you do decide to try a vacation in the great outdoors, you'll likely meet plenty of fellow campers. A camping trip is a classic way to vacation that is only becoming more popular. The number of camping households in North America grew by 6 million from 2014 to 2017. The trend is undeniable. More and more people agree that camping is the best way to spend your vacation time. Now, based on what we have just read, what is the author's main claim or argument? Is it camping is the best choice for a vacation? Glamping is the best way to camp? Or going to the beach is the most relaxing vacation? Well, let's see if we can rule some options out. The first one that sticks out, going to the beach. Is there really anything in this passage that is talking about beach life? No. So we can go ahead and rule that one as not an option right off the bat. So camping is the best choice for a vacation, or glamping is the best way to camp. Overall, we know that this passage is about camping, and the author's main claim is stated at the end of the first paragraph. In many ways, camping is the best type of vacation. So if camping is the best type of vacation, how does the author support it? Well, the author goes through and talks about the different ways that you can camp. Does the author support this idea that glamping is the best way to camp? Well, let's go down to the paragraph where we are told about glamping. Look at paragraph 4. And let me erase this line right here so we can see the passage more clearly. Though there is some debate about whether glamping is true camping, the point is there are a range of camping options. All right, so though there's some debate about whether glamping is true camping. Does that sound like the author is saying that glamping is the best way to camp? No, because the author goes on to say, the point is that there are a range of camping options. So the author is not just talking about glamping. The author is pointing out that glamping is just one of many options. So based on the information in this passage, the author's main claim or argument is that camping is the best choice for a vacation.